Hey guys, Magic Malcolm here. I wanted to make a video about my standard deck. It's gonna be Deck Teck for Is It Drake Control. I've been playing this deck since Rivals came out. Actually, that's when I started playing standard as a whole, because before it just wasn't playable. Just a few decks were too overpowered. But then some bannings occurred when Rivals came out, and it's in a pretty good shape right now. You can just win games with homebrews again. So that's when I started playing standard again. That was with this deck. I just wanted to show you what the deck is supposed to do and why I built it this way, and actually how I built it as a whole. Well, we have Desert of the Fervent and Desert of the Mindful. Unfortunately, there are no cycling lands in blue-red, so I had to go with the monocolored ones because you really don't want to get stuck on land. Get flooded on land. This deck draws a lot of cards, and you will just end up with too many lands in your hand. And it's really nice if you can cycle some away. So that's why I play these deserts. Okay, then we have Field of Ruin. We play 4 of those because when your opponent plays problematic non-basic lands, the most problematic of them all being Scavenger Grounds, you want to have a way to get rid of them, because Scavenger Grounds just exiles all graveyards. You want to fill your graveyard, so that would be problematic. So you need your Field of Ruins to get rid of them. And that's problematic for this deck. Like, when your opponent plays that, you can just plays that and activates it, you can just basically just concede. You're not going to win this anymore. That's why you need your Field of Ruins, so that as soon as they play it and they can't activate it immediately, or they don't, you can just blow it up, because you really don't want them to have that. So you really need 4, because you need to have them on the field when your opponent plays it. Here, there's Scavenger Grounds. Okay, just some islands, some mountains, some part of canals. You just need your fixing. It's just no big deal. Okay, then to the deck itself, we play 4 ops, because it's a cantrip, and it also allows you to scry, so you can make sure you don't draw something bad, or at least kind of can. And that just makes it really good, because you can just pay 1 mana and just throw an instant or sorcery in graveyard, which, by the way, is what this deck wants to do. It just replays it. That's just really good. That's just what the deck wants to do, so opt auto-include. Then 2 copies of Baral, Chief of Compliance. It's a small creature, and it's cheap, which is pretty good against aggro decks because it's an early blocker. And you basically play it for its first class. Instant sorceries you cast cost 1 less to cast. If your 2-drop card draw spells cost only 1 mana, you can play twice as many. That's really good, because then you can fill your graveyard twice as quickly, and you will just basically get to win twice as quickly. So you'll win more often. It's legendary, and it's not really necessary for the deck, so that's why I only play 2. But it's a really useful card. Next, Censor. It's a counterspell. It's actually the only counterspell you play in the main board. That's because of its second class, cycling for 1 blue. It's just like the opt, except that you don't get to scry. You just 1 mana cantrip. Done. The upside that you can counter an opponent's spells with it from time to time actually makes it way more relevant. Like, without it, it would already be okay. Like, not good, but sure. But with it, it just makes it really good, and just an auto-include in this deck. It's just really what this deck wants to do. Next up, we have Chart Course. It's 2 mana, draws you 2. You basically always ditch 1, because that's just an extra card in your graveyard. That's just good. You want to fill your graveyard. You don't care that you discard a card. It replaces itself. It replaces the card that you discard. It's most of the time just 2 additional instant sorceries in your graveyard, or some lands that you can miss. It's just good. It helps you cycle through your deck quickly to draw the pieces you need, while also just filling the graveyard, which is also what you need. It's just win-win. Then we have 2 copies of Fling. We'll get to that later on, because it on its own it just doesn't make sense in this deck, but once you see what the deck wants to do, it will make sense. But we'll just get to it later. Okay, you play 4 Lightning Strikes. Lightning Strike, I mean, Lightning Bolt's better, but it's unfortunately not in standard, so we have to do it with Lightning Strike. But 2 mana for a Lightning Bolt is still pretty good. You get to blow up your opponent's small creatures if you want to, but the fact that you can hit players is really relevant too, because you want to get your opponent's life total lower than the amount of instant sorceries in your graveyard to then make your Enigma Drakes lethal. That's basically what the deck wants to do. So, by dealing 3 damage to your opponent, while also throwing an instant in the graveyard, you basically change your opponent's life total by 4 for just 2 mana. That's huge. And the fact that you can also just blow up your opponent's creature if you need to makes it way better, and just a really good card. Strategic Planning. You play 4 off, because it just is an instant sorcery itself that goes to the graveyard, and you get to cycle through your deck because you get to see the top 3 cards of your deck, and one of them goes to your hand, so it replaces itself, and the rest just goes to your graveyard, which is extra gas for your Enigma Drake. It's so good. It really wins games. Then we have the Winds of Rebuke. It's like an unsummon effect, which most of the time isn't really good in standard, except for basically unsummon itself because it's so cheap. But Winds of Rebuke really helps this deck, because it can get rid of non-land permanents that are problematic to you for a turn, but that way it just disturbs your opponent's plan and it slows them down. And the fact that you both get the mill too makes it that more instant sorceries get into your graveyard for the spell you cast, which is more gas for your Enigma Drake. Like, yeah, this entire deck wants to fill the graveyard as quickly as possible to make your Enigma Drake lethal, because that's basically your only win con. Well, then we just had the 4 Enigma Drakes. Makes sense, like, that's what the deck's built around. You just make sure you have a lot of instant sorcerers in graveyard, and then you can just swing for the win. Or fling for the win. Once your Enigma Drake is big enough to just be lethal in 1 swing, or 2 swings, you just swing with your Enigma Drake, and after damage, you fling it in your opponent's face, and they're just dead. That's just an additional win con. That's why you play the 2 flings. You don't play more flings because you don't need to have them, because you can also just swing for the win. And you really don't want to get stuck with multiple flings in your hand, because if you don't have anything to fling is just a dead card. So you play 2 because you kind of want to draw 1 of them, but no more than 2 because you don't want to draw 2. Trust me, it feels really bad. Then we have 3 copies of Sweltering Suns. It's a board wipe. It just 3 damage to each creature. also yours, but noticing Enigma Drake has 4 toughness, so it survives. Like, yeah, Baral dies, but who cares about Baral? It's really good against aggro decks because aggro decks, against an aggro deck, it's just basically board wipe, everything on their side is dead. And if you're not playing an aggro deck, or I mean against an aggro deck, you can just cycle it for 3 mana and just replace it. Even if you're not playing against an aggro deck, it's not that bad to draw it. Like, you want to draw something else, but it's fine. Then a single hieroglyphic illumination. It draws cards. You can cycle it for 1, which makes it a cantrip for 1, which is what this deck wants. At late game, if you have the mana open, you can make it draw 2 as well for 3 additional mana if you really want it. It's just fine. Not that interesting, but it helps. Then Cryptic Serpent. This card is huge. It's most of the time, if you wait a few turns, it's just a 2 mana 6/5. Most decks have a lot of trouble dealing with this, except for control decks, because they just remove it. But against an aggro deck, this is just a huge blocker they can't attack through. It shuts their deck just totally down, and it wins games. You can swing with this too if you really need the extra points of damage because your Enigma Drake isn't big enough yet. It's just a good card. Like, the Cryptic Serpent and Enigma Drake together just form the core of the deck, and the rest is just card draw. And if you control pieces to make sure you don't die, and that's it. Okay, then let's take a look at the sideboard. We play 4 negates because, as I already pointed out, you're weak against control. Because if they remove your Enigma Drakes and Cryptic Serpents, you don't have anything left to win the game with. So you play 4 copies of negate to just make sure your opponents won't destroy your Enigma Drakes and Cryptic Serpents. An advantage is that if your opponent plays just removal spells, you can just wait until your Enigma Drake is big enough to be lethal in one swing and just play it and immediately fling it at your opponent. Because fling is instant speed. But if you can't, a negate is really useful. Trust me. Like, negate should be in every sideboard in blue. Then we have 3 Essence Scatters. Like, against aggro decks, you have your Sweltering Suns and your Lightning Strikes to remove them. But bigger creatures you basically can't deal with. So that's why you need to side in Essence Scatter in that case. You just need a way to deal with them. And Essence Scatter will do it. It will just counter spells. Just bye-bye. Gone. Well, a Braid, like, it can deal 3 damage to our creature, but for that you're already playing Lightning Strike, and yeah, sometimes 2 additional copies of Lightning Strike to deal with creatures is fine, but that doesn't come off that often. Most of the time you just use it for Destroy Target Artifact. Like against decks with like Mardu vehicles to get rid of Heart of Kieran, or decks that use Thematic Compass or Treasure Map. Against those decks, a Braid can just rack them. So that's why you play 2. You don't play more in sideboard because there aren't just that many decks you want to use it against, so 2 is just enough. We have 1 additional copy of Sweltering Suns because against aggro decks, more board wipes just means you have a higher chance to win, because if you just keep their board clear, they can't do a damn thing. So yeah, the additional copy in the sideboard is really useful. For the same reason, we play 2 Fiery Cannonades. The difference between Sweltering Suns and Fiery Cannonade is that Fiery Cannonade can't be cycled, So you're only sided in against control decks. Or no, wait, not against control decks, against aggro decks. It only deals 2 damage, which is a little bit less than 3, but against most aggro decks, that's not a big deal, especially not Merfolk. But a huge upside is that it's instant speed. By the way, when your opponent is playing pirates, this doesn't work, but I haven't seen a single pirate deck yet, so no big deal. And we have an additional hieroglyphic illumination because against control you just need more card draw spells to get to your negates stuff and your combo, because you need to fill the graveyard. You need to be doing relevant things, and just drawing cards is relevant. And then we have, last but not least, Nezahal Primal Tide. This card, when you side it against control decks, it basically says you win the game. It's 7 mana, so it's expensive, but again, in a control mirror, you'll get to 7 mana. Then it says it can be countered, so their counter spells won't do a thing. If no maximum hand size, not really relevant, because once you get to 7 mana, you'll probably don't have above 7 cards in your hand. Otherwise, you're doing something really wrong, or just drawing too many cards. Either way, that's most of the time not really relevant, not in standard. But the third clause is what really wrecks them, because whenever an opponent casts a non-creature spell, you get to draw a card, which can be a negate to counter their non-creature spell, for example, or just more gas to just keep going. And if they're targeted with a removal spell, you can just discard 3 cards and just flicker it to basically negate their removal spell. It's so good, it just wins games against control, because control decks just can't deal with this card. They just can't. Well, that's the deck. Well, tell me in the comments what you think of it, and bye guys. I'll probably upload some gameplay videos later this week, if you really want to know how it plays, but it's pretty simple. But bye guys.